in the springtime of 2019. I was $70,000 in debt, working 60 plus hours a week, living paycheck to paycheck. I got up off the floor and I went over to my bathroom mirror and I looked myself in the eyes and I actually said out loud to myself, Kat, you have the power to change your life.
Kat Cozadd is a transformational coach and manifestation expert who has helped over 500 entrepreneurs, authors, and high-achieving women achieve their dreams.
Manifestation, it's just using your thoughts and your subconscious mind to create your reality.
Let's say a woman wants to create financial abundance in 2025. What would be the first step that someone should take?
If you want a new, better, more abundant reality, it requires you to step in and show up as that version of yourself who already has it.
How do you manifest something that you don't know what it is?
I think there's two approaches to this. So first one is...
Today's episode is a really inspirational one. Today, we're going to talk all about manifestation, money mindset, and we'll dive into a little bit about sobriety too with our special guest, Kat Cozadd. Kat Cozadd is a transformational coach. She works with manifestation, mindset, and so much more. Kat has helped transform her own life and helps hundreds of women do the same. In this conversation, you'll learn about everything you need to know about how to start manifesting the life of your dreams and make 2025 your best year yet. I'm so excited for this episode because I really learned so much from Kat, and I think you will as well. So let's dive in.
Welcome, Kat.
Thank you. So happy to be here.
I'm excited to talk to you, but so let's just dive right in. So how did you become a transformational coach? So I know your story about how you hit rock bottom, but like what happened? How did you find this work?
Yeah, absolutely. So essentially to get to rock bottom, I'll paint the picture a little bit of growing up. But growing up, I'm from a super small rural town in Colorado. And I grew up in an alcoholic household where my mom wasn't a citizen of the United States. And in order to stay here and raise me and my brother, she had to tolerate a lot of pretty toxic stuff, which led to a lot of lack of safety in our house growing up, which at the time I didn't understand, but I constantly felt as though I was almost like bracing myself at all times. And as a byproduct of that, I gained a lot of weight as a kid. I was considered obese when I was a child, and I was like brutally bullied for that. And the compound of what was going on at home, plus like the bullying that was happening once I left my house, was at school or just out and about, took a really big impact on me. And as I got into like my early teenage years, I started to experience hopelessness for the first time, where at the age of 16, I started experiencing suicidal thoughts. And that was like my first introduction to therapy, because I, at the time, had no clue like what to do or how to get myself out of that position. And so therapy was a beautiful introduction to mindfulness, meditation, a lot of these really beautiful practices that I still use to this day. But ultimately, it kind of felt like putting a Band-Aid over a bullet wound, and it was never helping me heal the things that were creating that in the first place. And so after those teenage years, getting a bit older, I turned away from the mindfulness stuff and turned into drugs and alcohol, and used that as a coping mechanism to kind of like push down all of the anxiety, pain, lack of self-worth that I was experiencing. And that worked for a short period of time. It was fun for a short period of time, but ultimately it just added more fuel to the fire. And in 2019, I had dropped out of university. I moved to Denver, Colorado. I was serving and bartending at restaurants and managing restaurants. And I had an opportunity to move away and help open a new restaurant. And so I was like, great, this is my brand new experience. This is my fresh slate, and I can go do something completely different and just start a new life. And so I picked up my stuff and I moved across state lines for the first time ever. And I got to where I was living at the time, and everything felt exponentially worse. All the things that I thought that I was getting a fresh start from followed me, and they felt so much bigger than they did before because I was out of like my comfort zone in my environment. And so I then in the springtime of 2019 found myself in this position where I was $70,000 in debt, working 60 plus hours a week in a job that I really didn't enjoy, living paycheck to paycheck. And those feelings of hopelessness came back in, but 10 times louder than they had before. And I was truly, again, at this rock bottom position where I was like, I don't know if I can continue to go forward. And if I'm going to, it can't be in this way. And so I just started to pray. And I didn't know what to, because I had a really interesting or confusing relationship with faith growing up. My dad was a son of a pastor, so he completely resented and like revolted against religion.
Yeah.
And my mom was born and raised Catholic, but she had a lot of like Catholic guilt. So growing up in my household, we didn't talk about faith. And regardless, the only thing I felt like I could do in that moment was pray. I was like, whatever is out there, like, please send me a lifeboat. Whatever it is, I like will pay attention and I'm listening. And within the next few days, I was reintroduced to the concept of intentional manifestation. The first time I had heard about manifestation, I thought it was a bunch of bullshit and was like, nope, this doesn't work. And this time around, it felt completely different, because one morning I woke up on the floor of my apartment and I didn't remember how I got there. I partied so hard the night before. I'm not sure I should have woke up that morning. But as I was laying there, I felt this giant wave of energy wash through my body. And I got up off the floor and I went over to my bathroom mirror and I looked myself in the eyes and I actually said out loud to myself, Kat, you have the power to change your life. So why haven't you yet? And it was a few hours after that I was reintroduced to intentional manifestation via a podcast. And I just started binging that podcast, and everything that it was saying felt like it really resonated with me. And so I didn't know what to do with manifestation, but I just started to implement it into my life and made the promise to myself that I was going to implement it into my life every single day for a year to see what could happen. And over the course of that year, my life started to change so drastically, so quickly. And I was documenting my story, sharing about it online. And people were just interested in what I had to say and were starting to reach out to me and asking if I could help them with the same things. And through that, they started to change their lives as well. And it all turned into like a coaching scenario without me actually realizing that was what was happening.
Yeah. Our purpose finds us. It just happens, right?
Totally. 100%. And yeah, because like growing up, dropping out of school and like whatnot, the only thing I thought I could do was work in the food and beverage industry. Right. And that was my plan, to continue to figure out like, okay, what was the next step? And so I started my coaching business in January of 2020. So coming up on 5 years in just a few days here.
Congratulations.
And thank you. Yeah, the business took off almost instantly, which feels crazy to say, because I know that that's not the reality for so many people. And I feel so blessed about that. But since then have been able to just completely transform my life. I have been able to completely like release alcohol from my life. I'm going on 3 years sober.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah. And just like the financial circumstances that I was in before, have been able to create financial freedom, have been able to move to New York City, which has been my dream since I was 14 years old, and just live a completely different life, but ultimately also get to help hundreds of women in the process step into their power and create the lives that they're wanting through intentional manifestation and healing as well.
Right. I love that. I often say that our biggest struggle is our biggest gift, right? So it's like everything you went through, you had to go through to bring you to where you are and to be able to help all those other women.
Totally. It's so interesting because with that, it's like the biggest struggle that I had experienced at that point was everything that we just talked about. And now every single moment since then that I find myself in a season where I'm trying to rush through because I'm like, ugh, this sucks and I don't want to be here. I remind myself of that, of like, oh, there's so much goodness here that I am going through that is necessary for me to be able to continue to either light the path for others or like be able to just like know these lessons on such a like cellular level of my body versus just like have the mental concept of them.
Right. Totally. So for those who aren't familiar with manifestation, how do you define it?
Totally. So very, very simple understanding or like definition of manifestation. It's just using your thoughts and your subconscious mind to create your reality, which all of us are doing on a daily basis, whether we're aware of it or not, which is why I call it intentional manifestation, because if your thoughts and if your beliefs are creating your reality at all time, then that means that if you want to start to like direct the way in which your life is going, it requires a level of intentionality to be able to then become aware of what are the current stories that you're telling yourself about your life. What are the current beliefs that you have that aren't serving and supporting you? And how do we start to flip some of those scripts to step into the place that you're telling yourself the story of how you want your life to go and things that really serve and support you being the happiest, healthiest, and wealthiest version of yourself. And then taking that just the step further, manifestation, essentially, the concept of it is that your words, your thoughts, your actions, your behaviors, and your emotions all hold a vibrational frequency. And that vibration then is being emitted out into the universe or the quantum field. And by the universal law of attraction, which is one of 12 universal laws of nature, you're receiving like vibrational energy back into your life. So essentially, in other words, some people like to call this karma. Some people like to call it what you give out is what you get back. It's just taking that concept and being very intentional with it to, again, create the life that you want.
Right. So if, let's say a woman wants to create financial abundance in 2025, right? What would be the first step that someone should take?
Yeah, awesome question. So I'm a firm believer that the first place you always want to start before you get to the feel good things is digging up the dirt of what does not feel good. Because essentially, if you're having a challenging time with money and you're wanting to create a new financial reality for yourself, and you just start to shower yourself with all of the feel good things of manifestation, which we'll talk about in a moment, but you ignore the not so feel good things, you're not building a long-lasting, sustainable change within your finances, and eventually will experience those things that are hanging out underneath the surface. So first place to start is always becoming aware and being brutally honest with yourself about what is your current story about money, or what are those current money habits, beliefs, emotions that are not serving you, and taking them out of the equation. The way that I like to think about this is essentially like if your mind and if your body was a garden, right now, if you're having a challenging time with money, or you have a relationship with money that doesn't feel good, kind of like love, hate, or you're anxious or whatever it may be, that means you have weeds in the garden. And instead of walking around the garden, trimming down the weeds, pretending like they're not going to grow back, which a lot of resources unfortunately tell you to do by forcing gratitude, force positivity, force affirmations, force meditation. Right. Yes, that feels good for a short period of time, and you're going to experience change for a short period of time because you've trimmed those weeds down. But ultimately, because the roots are still underneath the ground, you have to go back and pull them out. Otherwise, they're going to continue to grow back. Right.
Also, without pulling out the roots, it can be really hard. Like, let's say you're just saying an affirmation. It can be really hard to actually feel that affirmation, right? To say, I'm abundant, but if you don't feel it or thinking and you have all these negative thoughts coming in, it's basically useless.
Totally. That's why so many people think that like manifestation is faking it till you make it, because they're like, well, I don't believe it, but I guess I'll keep saying it, as opposed to, like you just said, is like, when you start to remove those weeds in the garden, you plant the seed of I'm abundant, and it starts to feel so much better. It starts to feel true. So yeah, that's the place that I would suggest is start to clear out the garden, clear out those weeds, get abundantly clear on what those weeds are. I'm a firm believer that a limiting belief is anything that does not support you being the happiest, healthiest, and wealthiest version of yourself. So even some of these stories about money that people are like, well, that's just true.
Right. That's reality. Like, I can't pay my bills.
Totally. They're like, well, that's not limiting. That's just true. And it's like, if it doesn't support you being the happiest, healthiest, wealthiest version of yourself, it's a limiting belief. Right. And so identifying those things so that you can start to remove them. And then the next step of that is removing them, which comes through whether it be subconscious reprogramming, healing modalities, somatic healing, like actually physically getting it out of the cellular level of your body. And then comes planting the seed so that then you can have this fresh, fertile soil for your seed to actually grow in.
Right. So for women, we have the block sometimes of believing our reality is our reality, when in fact our thoughts and our beliefs are creating our reality that we've decided is our reality, right? Reality is all the way we perceive it. But how about for the women out there who don't know what their blocks are, right? Sometimes it can be really hard. They can be hidden. Like maybe we can even feel it, but we can't consciously pinpoint what it is. What would you recommend?
Totally. So I would say for that, there's 3 areas that I've found majority of blocks live in. If you're experiencing a block and you don't know what it is, I'd say first and foremost, the easiest way to find a block is to run full force towards whatever it is that you're trying to pursue, because it will come up in the process of it.
Yeah.
I think that oftentimes we're trying to be proactive and like find a block before we pursue the thing that we want, so it doesn't come up later. But oftentimes those blocks or whatever it may be aren't actually ready or available to you until you're actually in the process of pursuing whatever it may be. So that's the first thing I would suggest, is just like go full force towards whatever it is. And if you notice that there's something that is stopping you, or you notice you're not getting the result that you want, it's going to come up in the process of that if you slow down enough to become aware of it. So that's the first thing. But those 3 areas that blocks typically live within, first is a lack of safety. So when it comes to manifestation, the most important thing, in my opinion, is safety. And what I mean by safety is this like deep internal safety, because oftentimes the world conditions us to believe that safety is found in money, relationships, jobs, so on and so forth, when actually at any time those things could be taken away from us, which therefore our sense of safety would be stripped as well. So identifying internally how safe you feel with yourself, how safe you feel with money, how safe you feel with the world and the things that you're wanting to engage with, and understanding like what's disconnected you from safety in the first place. Because within reconnecting to a deep sense of safety inside of yourself, manifestation and any sort of blocks that may be there start to remove themselves, and manifestation becomes a hell of a lot easier. So safety is a huge one. Second one is that oftentimes the thing that you're wanting to manifest has absolutely nothing to do with what you're manifesting, and instead has everything to do with primarily your relationship to yourself. And so typically if there's some sort of block, let's say again with money, I found that almost every single money block that isn't like abundantly obvious in the actual like relationship to money is a byproduct of your relationship to yourself or relationships to other people, and the way in which you have a limited perspective on yourself. And so taking just like a really deep dive into your relationship with yourself, understanding how do you perceive yourself? How do you perceive fear, judgment, failure, discomfort, your relationships to others, the world? Because within that, again, they become really obvious. And then the last one I would say is actually the relationship to money. That one shows a ton of different limiting beliefs to people, even if it's not directly related to money. It's like these beliefs of how we can be or what we're capable of or how we interact with the world, all based off of our perception of money. So those 3 areas I found for majority of the people that I work with, that's like where the blocks live. Right. So if you start to dig into those areas, odds are you'll start to uncover.
Right. So going back to safety, obviously things like physical abuse and sexual abuse are going to throw off our ability to feel safe. But what are some other ones that you've seen in your work that might not be as obvious?
Yeah, that's such an awesome question. So I would say that some of the like biggest ways that I've seen a lack of safety present itself has been like childhood bullying in some sort of capacity, kind of like I shared with my experience. And I think in some way, shape, or form in childhood, we all at one point kind of felt like we didn't fit in or that we were bullied in some sort of capacity. And as adults, we can like really write that off and be like, yeah, whatever, like that didn't matter. When in reality, it actually did. Right. So giving yourself permission to like actually acknowledge and own those things. So bullying being a big one. Oftentimes, so the relationship we have to our parents or primary caregivers is the biggest one for safety. Regardless if you feel as though you had a safe childhood or not, the dynamics that we learn from our parents, whether that be their own relationship to themselves, each other, or you, often can impact the relationship with safety. So, for example, if you had a dad that worked a lot growing up and you felt as though because of that he wasn't around as much as you wanted him to, that can impact the safety that you have within yourself, believing that like somebody's going to be there for you, support is going to be there for you, money is going to be there for you,
Right.
these things are going to be there for you. And it's like, that was just dad going to work,
Right.
but
That's
we perceive it as a lack of safety.
Right. That's interesting you mentioned dad, because I feel like most people think about mom when it comes to our parental guidance, the person watching out for us. But it can be the fact that your father is going to work too, which generationally, at least for me, I'm 39, like most dads went to work.
Yeah, 100%. One of the most interesting things that I've learned in the past 5 years of being a coach is that according to attachment theory, the way that the subconscious mind is formed is that your perception of yourself, or like a extension of your inner world, is all from a learning of like mom or a female primary caregiver, where your internal experience of how you relate to yourself is essentially that extension of mom, the way that she talked about herself, the way she treated herself, and the way that she interacted with the world, as well as how she talked to you, treated you, and made you feel. Whereas dad is an extension of the world. So it's like dad is an extension of money, of relationships, of work ethic, of how you perceive the divine or God, whatever we want to call it here. And through that, we then see the external experience. And this is another area people can look for blocks, is if it's something that feels like it's an external experience, so money, relationships, jobs, so on and so forth, that oftentimes will tie back into dad. Whereas if it's an internal experience, that ties into mom.
That's interesting. Also, from a Chinese medicine perspective, we see the same thing, that it's your early childhood experiences and your parents, and it can even be ancestral trauma that has been passed down to us, but that creates our reality and the way we grow up in the world and the things we develop later in life. But it's interesting, the mom and dad dynamic, because in Chinese medicine, women are very yin, right? And men are very yang. So if you think of yin, that's like internal and that's nourishment. Yeah. And yang is like external and activity and the outside world.
Totally.
Really
that's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Super cool. Yeah. And so with that, I think that if somebody's, at least in my experience, if somebody's putting so much of their safety into the external, I always encourage them to look at like, where in your relationship to your dad did you feel a lack of safety? And it's the thing that I always want to like throw in there is that they were never trying to make you feel unsafe. Right. Even in my experience, like I was sharing, it's like grew up and like actively felt unsafe. My dad never wanted me to feel unsafe. And like now I have a really awesome relationship with him. And some of the things that we talked about, he's just like, wow, like that sucks to know that that was how it was for you growing up. Same with my mom. But if it's feeling like a external lack of safety thing, check in on the relationship with dad. If it's an internal lack of safety, feeling not good enough, feeling as though you're not pretty enough, skinny enough, whatever it may be, check in on that relationship to mom and or past experiences that you've had where you feel as though you weren't enough in some sort of capacity.
Interesting. I love that. And also like our bond with our parents and the way we're raised is also our capacity to handle bullying, going back to what you first said, right? Mm-hmm. In some sense, everyone's going to be bullied growing up, but it's how we accept that, whether we accept it or we don't accept it, that's going to shape our thoughts or reality in the future.
Totally. 100%. I think it's so interesting to like over the past few years, I've worked with 500 plus women. That's and amazing. To see how universal all of our experiences are, because I think that a lot of the times when we're going through anything, we feel really alone. We feel really isolated in it. And I feel so honored that I've been trusted by so many women to have these conversations and help untangle beliefs and traumas and whatnot, and to come to the realization that so many of our experiences, so many of our blocks are all universal, and they're actually things that everybody else is experiencing. And so when we can come back to this place of like, okay, yeah, really it comes down to what did I experience in childhood? What were the core beliefs that I picked up from that? How did those beliefs then manifest moving forward? And like, what do I want to do with them now? Then we have a completely new experience of like how we can proceed.
Right. So when trying to manifest something, and we can just use money for an example, how important is embodiment? Maybe explain what embodiment is for people who don't know.
Yeah. Embodiment's the key. Embodiment is like it. There's so many misconceptions out there in the world of manifestation, especially like thanks to social media and TikTok and all of the things. And it's not to like shit on any of those things. It's just to say that there's a lot of cloudiness surrounding manifestation. And when it comes to the manifestation process, honestly, the only thing you actually need is to embody. And so what I mean by embodiment is taking the concepts of manifestation, taking the ideal of the life that you're wanting to create and the things that you desire to have. So again, like you said, with money, if you're wanting to like radically increase your income, and you're wanting to have like that quantum leap in your finances, you want to identify who's that version of yourself who's already there. How does she walk? How does she talk? How did they walk? How did they talk? And what is like the core characteristics of that version of yourself? Because once you identify that, then that's who you essentially want to become. And so the embodiment is taking the mental conception of that, who is that person, and bringing it down into your physical body, into your actions, into your behaviors, into your emotions, into the way that you respond to the world, into the way that you like move forward towards those things that you're wanting, as opposed to showing up again, kind of like we were talking about earlier, with the current narrative that you have about life or how you're currently showing up for things, because the way that you currently are has created the reality that you have, or the way that you were in the past has created the reality that you have. If you want a new, better, more abundant reality, it requires you to step in and show up as that version of yourself who already has it. So yeah, I would say for the embodiment process, that's really what it is identify who you believe that future version of yourself is, or who you desire to become, and start to show up as that version here and now before there's any sort of quote unquote evidence of the fact that you should, because I think that a lot of times we're waiting to be like, okay, well, it makes sense now. Or once X happens, then this can happen. And it's like, you don't have to wait. You can start showing up now. So for example, when I was in 2019 at that rock bottom where I hadn't had my business yet, I was working as a barista every single day from 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. And in that experience, I knew I didn't want to be a barista making minimum wage anymore. I wanted to be a successful online coach. And so I, every single day, showed up to my barista job in the embodiment of I am already a successful online coach making at least $10,000 a month with time freedom, with location freedom, with the ability to help impact people in the way that I desire. And my only job in being here today at this barista job is being the brightest light in the room and making people stay as they come in, connecting with people, seeing them on a deeper level. And then as I left the barista job and got home, then I stepped into the business owner role. And I was like, okay, I'm a successful online coach making at least $10,000 a month. I'm stepping into this role in every single area of my life in the ways that it wouldn't, quote unquote, make sense to right now based off of like who I actually am and where I'm actually at. But our internal experience when it comes to manifestation precedes the external. So it's so important to be in control of what's happening internally so that you can start to see the shifts and changes externally.
How can we keep that sense of embodiment when real life sets in, right? When we go to the coffee shop and we can't afford the $10 latte, or we go to the grocery store and we have to watch how much we're spending. Like, how can you keep that sense of abundance when abundance isn't in front of you practically at the moment?
Totally. So with that, two things. First one is redefining abundance, because I think that a lot of the times, especially in spiritual spaces, we can confuse money and abundance and rope them into one and being like, okay, they're one, the abundance isn't here. When in reality, abundance is always here. It's so present. It's ever present. There is abundance available to you at all times in the way that you feel inside of your body, in the external circumstances that you see around you. I feel so grateful here in New York City. This place is beyond inspiring to me. I look out my window and I'm like, oh, just looking out this window is abundance. Like, it's just a free source of abundance that I get at any and all times. So disconnecting money from abundance, because the more that you can do that, the more that you can step into the space of feeling that sense of abundance, which actually attracts more money into your life. So that being the first thing, maintaining the embodiment of feeling like the happiest, healthiest, wealthiest version of yourself when you actually can't afford whatever it is that you're wanting, or the financial resources aren't there to make those moves in the way that you're wanting to. I think it comes down to a few different things. I think the first one is truly like deeply rooting into the belief that the internal does precede the external, and that your essentially work in that time frame where the money isn't there is to be able to still feel rich internally when you don't have the physical dollar amount to do the things that you're wanting. And with that, it's like, we're working through an entire lifetime's worth of subconscious conditioning that's like, you can only feel good if the money's there. You can only this if the money's there. And so it's almost like turning it into a game. The way that I've seen it for myself is like, okay, this is less about having this like hard, weird consistency thing with it, because I think that a lot of the times too, once you get into the mode of trying to manifest something, you then can get really serious and take it so seriously and then start to beat yourself up if you fall out of the embodiment. It's like, no, let's just make it a game. Like, if this was a game and you were showing up as the rich version of yourself every single day internally, starting to tap into that feeling. And when it comes to then in that moment, not having the physical money, it's like, okay, then talking about it in the way of like, you're prioritizing your money in other ways at the moment. You could prioritize the $10 latte. I can imagine if you wanted the $10 latte, and you absolutely can get that $10 latte if it's going to make you feel like the richest version of yourself. Or does prioritizing your money in other ways also feel abundant, feel good to you? So seeing it in that way, as well as I think just bringing yourself back to in the moment. If you find yourself slipping out of the embodiment of it, so what? That's okay. We're all human.
Right.
And just catching yourself in those moments and actually celebrating it as opposed to beating yourself up for it, and then bringing yourself back. So whether that be through taking a moment to hold your hand over your heart and reconnect to your intention, or closing your eyes and taking a few deep breaths to like cleanse your energy and come back, or say an affirmation, or read a note in your phone, or whatever it may be, having these little reminders to help you bring yourself back into the embodiment. But ultimately knowing that like, yeah, you're going to fail at that so many times because it's an entire lifetime's worth of subconscious conditioning. But every single time you bring yourself back to it, you're creating a pattern interrupt inside of the subconscious mind, which then allows you to slowly but surely start to rewire the structure of the subconscious mind to break off those old neural pathways that are rooted in lack and bring you back to the space of abundance.
Right. So you can still manifest without feeling good 100% of the time, right?
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
People get stuck in that feeling of like, I'm doing it wrong because I can't always feel good, but we're not meant to always feel good.
No. And honestly, wanting to always feel good is sometimes the biggest manifestation blocker, because it's oftentimes in the experience of unpleasant emotions or unpleasant circumstances that we're gaining the keys to unlock new doors. And if you're not giving yourself permission to actually feel that hard moment or go through that painful thing, you're not getting to the keys to the new door. And so for the women that I work with, I always say that, like, as you're rewiring the subconscious mind or as you're in the embodiment process, you want to aim to be there at least 51% of the time. And the reason it's 51 is because that's dominant. Anything over 50% is dominant. And so if you're in that energy 51% of the time, that's enough. If there's 49% of the time that you're still experiencing pain or frustration or anger or whatever it may be from the past, that's okay. And again, where those discomforts are, where the unpleasant emotions are, that's actually where the pot of gold is. And oftentimes we try to stray away from it because it feels unpleasant and it is uncomfortable. But the more that you can give yourself permission to dig into those areas, that's absolutely where the keys are to unlock that next level of your life and continue to walk through new doors into a new reality.
Right. I love that. So for women who don't know what they want to manifest, so a lot of times in my practice, I will get women who are in a job that is not their ideal situation. And oftentimes that energy is also contributing to physically what is going on in their body, right?
Yep.
Because I work in the same way of thoughts and beliefs create reality and are imprinted in their energetic body.
Yep.
But they don't know yet what they want to do, right? They don't know where they want to go. How do you manifest something that you don't know what it is?
I think there's two approaches to this. So first one is the route of like reverse engineering. Odds are they know what they don't want. If they're coming in and they're feeling this pain in their body or whatever it is due to the stress of their current circumstances, they know that they don't want to feel that way. And I think the beautiful thing about manifestation and like the beautiful thing about our universe is that you don't have to be hyper specific when it comes to manifesting better, more abundant things into your life. It really can just start with the feeling. And if you know the feelings you don't want to feel, odds are you know the feelings that you do want to feel. You want to feel more peace. You want to feel more freedom. You want to feel more fulfillment, more joy, more love, more abundance on a day-to-day basis. So starting with that of like, okay, I'm unsure of what it is, but I'm open to understanding how I can feel more peace, more joy, more freedom, so on and so forth. And starting at that point, and or taking, for example, again, my past experience, I had no clue that I was going to be an online coach or that I was going to be a manifestation transformation coach. And in that position where I was a barista at the time, I just started to have this conversation with the universe, which then this ties into the second piece of like calling on and asking the divine to support you, whether you call it the universe, God, source, spirit, anything. But asking that higher power to support you within presenting whatever it may be to you. So for me, when I was in that position, I had no clue, but I would come home and before I went to bed every single night, I would say, okay, universe, I have no clue what I'm supposed to do next. But whatever it is, I know that I want time freedom, location freedom, financial freedom, making at least $10,000 a month. And I want to do something that illuminates like my heart's desires and like really uses my soul's purpose. I'm open to whatever it may be. And then just starting to listen to and follow the signs, the clues, the synchronicities that start to come up in the days or weeks following that. And so for me, I started to receive so many clues about like manifestation, coaching, online coaching, sharing on Instagram, all of those things. And I had no clue what the next step was, but I just followed my intuition to follow the things that felt inspired at that time. And through it, like I shared earlier, it led me to this. But for somebody who doesn't know what they want, you know enough of what you don't want to reverse engineer it. And then I'm such a firm believer in the fact that if we're to believe that we're doing this all on our own is such a huge disfavor to ourselves, and to actually call on that divine power, again, whatever somebody calls it, and welcome it into your life, because that power has a higher and greater plan for you than you have for yourself. And if you can open yourself up to it enough to trust that it will lead you to that, then you will be led there.
Right. And I didn't grow up with religion. I didn't grow up with God. I didn't grow up with spirituality. I now obviously have spirituality in my life. But what I always say for people whose spirituality still feels like a little icky, your higher being can be your higher self, right? We all have a higher self. And like everyone can tap into that no matter what your religion or beliefs might be.
Yeah, absolutely. What was your journey of like finding spirituality like after not growing up with it? Because I relate with that so much.
Yeah, I mean, it was tricky because it's like you're going against what you're taught. Not that I was taught not to believe in anything, but I wasn't grown up believing in anything, right?
Yeah.
I found spirituality through the medicine I do, through acupuncture, because I don't believe you can be an acupuncturist and work with energy without spirituality.
Yeah.
But I didn't come to the medicine having spirituality.
Yeah.
But in some sense, I always felt like there was a greater energy around me, right? Like I also did not grow up knowing I was going to be an acupuncturist. It was not my first career.
Yep.
But I knew I didn't want to do what I was doing, which was working in marketing at the time.
Yeah.
And I was open to new possibilities. And in a sense, I wanted to work in health and wellness. I didn't know in what aspect. I actually, while I was still working in marketing, a full-time 6-figure job, I became a personal trainer just because I knew I wanted to help people in some physical capacity. And doing that, then I realized things I didn't want to do along the way, right? But I wasn't doing that for money. I was doing that for joy and for openness and for exploration. Yep. And I forgot what I was talking about, but my point is, if you're open, what's meant for you is going to find you.
Totally.
And even in that process, like I knew there was a higher being guiding me. And to me, it didn't matter what that higher being was. It still doesn't really matter.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's beautiful too, because in the question that you asked me of like, how does somebody find that if they don't know what it is? Your story is a perfect example of that. My story is a perfect example of that. But oftentimes it's not the first thing that we then step into afterwards. It's taking the first step, trusting that you're going to be led somewhere eventually and that you'll know where you're supposed to be once you get there. And having these experiences along the way that continue to open up new doors, like I keep saying throughout this, is like just trusting that, like, I think there's such an obsession with the fact that we need to like get to like what our purpose is or what like we're supposed to be doing or what's going to bring us the most money or what's going to bring us whatever. And forgetting the fact that like life is just this beautiful dance that sometimes the dance is going to make so much sense and you're going to be in it and you're going to be grooving and moving. And there's other moments that you're going to feel like, I have no clue how to do this dance. I do not know the steps. I feel incredibly awkward out here on the dance floor. And those moments as well, like they're not taking you off your path. They're just part of learning the bigger picture and being okay in those moments of dance and the tempo changing up.
Right. And you will evolve and shift as you continue to go on. I think moving forward is one of the keys, right? So when I got into acupuncture, I found acupuncture at around 27. 6 months later, I applied for school, right? Because I was open to it and I was willing to just go with it, right? You just have to have courage to make some movement. But even then, I was going to acupuncture school planning to be a sports medicine acupuncture. At no point did I think I was going to get into specializing in trauma and women's health. But I just kept moving forward until my purpose, for lack of better words, found me.
Yeah, 100%. And how, I just think for myself, it's like, how boring would it be if you would have found that at like age 18 and like, that's all you, and it's not that it's like, that's all you would be doing, but it's like, wow, how cool that like you got to go on this journey to lead you to where you are. And that like, who knows what's going to happen from this point moving forward. And so much more evolution can and will continue to happen for you and for me. I've been going through that over the past like 2-ish years where there's been something that hasn't felt quite right. And it's not that I don't love what I do. I love what I do, but I know that there's something more.
Right, there's more.
Yeah. And there's been this like beautiful uncovering where the first year of it, I was like, oh, like this feels gross. It feels bad. I don't want to be in whatever this is. This year, it's been a full heart open. Okay, I have no clue. I know that there's more. Continue to show me, continue to guide me, continue to lead me. And it's been really cool to see how big of a difference there's been in like the manifestation process for me, as well as just like the way that I'm experiencing life by approaching it through that lens, as opposed to the just like get me there. And I don't want to be in this position. It's like, oh, there's so much goodness in every single moment.
Right. So for our listeners, I think that's a beautiful reminder to enjoy the journey and to be open to it, right? You don't ever have to have a set destination. You can just go along for the ride.
100%. Yeah. I am such a firm believer in the fact that wherever you're trying to get to is not going to feel fulfilling if you don't enjoy the journey of getting there. That was something that I learned in the first year of business. I was so obsessed with the idea of making my first $100,000 because growing up, I grew up in a household where we never made as a family more than $40,000, $50,000 a year. And I saw the families and friends that I had that were making over six figures. I was like, oh, they're like living, they like have good lives. And so I had such an obsession with hitting my first six figures because I thought that's where a lot of like the trauma, the pain, the things that I had was just naturally going to go away. And so I hustled and I grind and I made it happen within the first 10 months of starting my business. And I got to that point and I was just like, this sucks. Like, and now I feel actually exponentially worse because all of the issues that I thought were going to go away once I got to this place actually didn't. And now I'm left with uncovering and unpacking all of that, which was, again, one of the most beautiful experiences to be able to get to do that. But I think oftentimes with manifestation, people put themselves into the manifestation process with the idea of once I'm there, everything's going to be better. And it's like, you can get yourself to that place and still be like, oh, things aren't better. And I actually am just in a new position with the same past experiences. And so taking this journey step by step and uncovering and releasing the past pain, the past trauma, the things that have created that disconnect or unfulfillment inside of yourself, but also enjoying the steps to get there and the sweetness of moving at whatever pace you're moving at, I think is crucial to then get to that place and be like, oh, okay, yeah, I like this.
Right. And I think that's where embodiment can be so powerful too, right? Because it teaches you to feel good with what you have in the moment.
Absolutely. 100%. Yeah. As opposed to being so forward thinking all the time, being like, yep, it's just over there.
Right. When I get there, I'll be happy. Or when I achieve this, I can relax and I'll be content.
Yeah. That I'll be happy when syndrome, I think is one of the biggest, just like faults that we have as humans.
Yeah. That's the biggest block I see in my fertility patients is this waiting to get what they want, to see a positive pregnancy test in order to feel good when what's blocking you to begin with is that lack of feeling good.
Yeah, totally. It's so interesting. That was definitely one of my biggest ones to overcome. And of course, I still find myself in it sometimes where I'm like, oh, once X happens, then. And it's like, no, okay, I can feel that now. Like I can feel that abundance, that happiness, that goodness, whatever it is that I'm seeking in that. That's actually recently, I was very focused on manifesting a relationship for a while. And I'm like ready. I want a partner. I'm ready for the whole shebang. And there was a lot of lack and intensity surrounding that. And in the past few months, I've just been like, whatever, like I trust the timing of the divine to bring that into my life when I'm ready for it. And so instead of that, I'm going to date myself. And of course, I'm still going to go on dates. I'm still going to meet people. I'm still going to do the thing, but I'm going to channel all of that love that I'm trying to give to somebody else back into myself. And it's been so fun to be able to experience and feel that versus the I can only feel loved or good or whatever it is once the relationship is here. It's like,
Right.
I'm actually just going to date myself and it's going to feel awesome.
Best date ever.
Yeah, totally. I'm like, oh, I'm cool.
So I want to go back to something you talked about at the beginning, but you've mentioned that you've been sober for 3 years. And I know you said that alcoholism kind of brought you, or not alcoholism, but alcohol brought you to a low. So how has sobriety impacted your life? How did you decide to become sober?
Ooh, man. Yeah. So removing alcohol from my life is hands down the best decision I've ever made in my entire life. I actually was texting my brother this past week because he got sober probably like 4 or 5 months before I did. And he was such an inspiration to me in making that decision for myself as well, because we both grew up in a household where it was just like constant. And we didn't fall into the patterns of like alcoholism in that sort of capacity, but I fell into the patterns of like binging for sure and partying really hard. And so that was a big factor in my decision to get sober. But the like straw that broke the camel's back was I was in a new relationship and I was really starting to fall for the guy that I was talking to and with at that time. And I went home to Colorado to visit some of my friends. And while I was out there, I ended up getting drunk with my friend's husband because she was pregnant at the time. And I just sent a stupid text message to this guy that I was dating. And I woke up the next morning and there was no response from him. And I like knew in my soul that I wasn't going to get a response from him and that he was ghosting me. And I felt so humiliated that I never wanted to feel that way again. And I woke up that day, and because my best friend was pregnant, I was like, you know what? For the rest of your pregnancy, I'm not drinking either. And I almost like tricked myself into it because at the time I was fairly new to New York City and I couldn't imagine like making new friends or doing new things in the city without like alcohol being involved.
Yeah, there's a big drinking culture in New York too.
Totally. Yeah. And so I was 26 years old when I stopped drinking. And to be a 26-year-old in New York City without alcohol felt so intimidating. So I tricked myself into sobriety at first, where I was like, yeah, I'm just doing it for the remainder of her pregnancy. And then once her pregnancy was coming to a close, I was like, you know what? I'm just going to do it for a year. And then once the year came to a close, I was at this place where I was like, you know what? I think this is a lifetime thing. And I'm not putting that label on it yet, but I know that it needs to be longer than what it currently is, because in the first, I'd say like 6 to 8 months of getting sober, I didn't realize how hard it was going to be to relearn who I was as a like adult without alcohol, because essentially from age 18 to 26, alcohol was part of my personality, where I was like the girl who always wanted to party, always wanted to have fun. Oh, Kat's always up for a drink, so on and so forth. And so to step out of that and step into sobriety was not just removing alcohol from my life, which I actually never craved alcohol from the second that I stopped drinking it. There's never been a moment where I'm like, oh, this would be better with a drink.
Right.
It's
feeling like shit would never feel better.
Totally. But it was the, who am I? And like actually relearning who I was. And so the past almost 3 years has been just like a beautiful journey of understanding who I am. And I think that the most beautiful thing that I've recognized in it is that everything that I thought I was going to lose by giving up drinking, I've actually gained, and so much more in sobriety and not drinking. And for like the listeners, what I mean by that is the confidence that I thought I would lose by releasing alcohol, I've actually gained, and it's genuine confidence as opposed to liquid courage. The fun that I thought I would lose by not drinking and like the partying and all of the things, I've actually gained in terms of meaningful connection with people and like friendships that have gone deeper than I ever imagined friendships could be. And just like this deep sense of like worth inside of myself, where I got so much of that from like being the life of the party and all of the like social engagements that I had when I was drinking, is now it's like, oh, I just feel that on a day-to-day basis. And I don't need that external validation to say, yes, no, I am, I'm not. And I just like know my worthiness.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, it's been such a game changer. I'm so grateful for the fact that this happened, because even just like a week before I made the decision to stop drinking, I'd been questioning my relationship with alcohol for a long time. I actually even hired a therapist at one point who I lied to every single session about my drinking, because
that's a huge waste of money, Kat.
Totally, I know. It was during the pandemic, and I like knew that like my drinking was unhealthy. Right. And anytime I talked to her about it, she was like, well, have you just like thought about drinking less? And I was like, oh, crazy. Like, haven't thought of that one. And so I didn't know how to like continue to move it forward. And at the time I hadn't like established my voice in this way of like, okay, just cut the sessions off and don't do it. But I did after like 6 weeks or something. And just like got to this place where I was like, okay, I can move forward in a different way. I forget what my original train of thought was. So we both did that. But yeah, it's best decision I've ever made.
Was it ever hard? Like, did you ever, a month or two in, stop, maybe you're having dinner and want to have a drink, or?
No, it was never hard. Genuinely, there's never been a moment that I've craved alcohol since quitting. The only hard moments have been where I've been on a date or I've been traveling in Europe or whatever. And I've been like, oh, it would be easier if I just like had a drink right now. The second month of being sober, I went on a week-long bachelorette party to Puerto Rico.
Oh my God.
It would have been so much easier.
You really tested yourself.
Totally. It would have been so much easier to drink with them and like party with them. But I feel really grateful that like once I make a decision to something, there's like no and ifs or buts for me. I'm just like so bought into what I'm committing to. So no, it was never hard in that way. It was hard in the way of trying to learn who I was and thinking it would be easier if I just like gave up this thing that I had committed to, not for the sake of wanting to drink, but for the sake of like fitting in.
Right. Was it uncomfortable relearning who you were?
Oh my God, 100%. I would say like probably the most uncomfortable experience of my life. Yeah, I went through some pretty uncomfortable times this year that like rival it, but it was super uncomfortable. And I think that one of the things that I love to share with the women who come to me and ask me about like getting sober is that it's okay. Kind of like I was talking about the uncomfortable or unpleasant emotions earlier in the sense of manifestation. We oftentimes stray away from like what is uncomfortable, but the discomfort that I found in releasing alcohol from my life and like relearning my identity as a 20-something-year-old living in New York City who doesn't drink was actually like a pot of gold. I just had to continue to like sit in the discomfort to get to the gold of the experience.
Right. You need the dark to get to the light, right?
Yeah.
I just want to mention something that I heard you say, Kat, in your content is that the only resource you can get back is time. So for people who are on the edge about moving forward in life, making changes, making that big leap, just something to consider that I love that you said.
Yeah, I'm such a firm believer that oftentimes the thing that holds us back from pursuing the life that we desire is like thinking that the money isn't there or that we're not going to be able to do it with our jobs or whatever it may be. And the way that I've reframed all of that for myself, because there's been moments where it's made zero sense to invest in myself. It's made zero sense with the like job that I had at the time, the money I had in the bank or didn't have in the bank. And the thing that always brought me back to I deserve it, and actually it's the most important thing that I can do for myself, is the fact that time is the only resource that we cannot get back. And so do I want to prioritize this money that absolutely I can make more of, and like I'm going to trust myself that I can make more of? Or do I want to spend more time in a position that I don't want to be in due to the belief that I can't? And so, yeah, time is the most valuable resource that we have. And I cannot just like put more emphasis on that for the people who are listening. If there's something that you've been putting off doing because of the fear of money or something else, consider how valuable your life and your time is and move forward from that energy as opposed to the fear. It's really like the difference between moving forward from fear or faith. And I'm always wanting to move from the energy of faith.
Right. And I think it's important when you're making any decision in your life at all to understand where that energy is coming from, right? Is it coming from fear or from faith, as you said?
Yeah. Yeah. Because you get two completely different results.
Right. And you can even do the same thing and get two completely different results.
Totally. 100%. That's what I was going to say is like two people can be doing the exact same thing. And one can be moving from fear and one can be moving from faith. And you're going to get completely different results because It's not so much the action that matters, but instead the energy behind the action. And if you're choosing to prioritize your time, prioritize yourself, your life, that inspiration, your faith, and what you value, that's going to move mountains compared to allowing fear to be in the driver's seat.
Right. So for women out there who are ready to take control of their time, who want to manifest a life beyond their wildest dreams, to move forward, how can they find you? How can they work with you?
Yeah. So best way to connect with me is just finding me over on Instagram. My handle is @Kat Cozadd, which I'm sure you'll put in the show notes.
I'll put all your information in.
Awesome. Yeah. So Instagram is the best way to connect with me, to see what I have going on at that time, whether you be based in New York City or elsewhere. Lots of good things to be able to be a part of, whether that be a live workshop, an academy, my membership community, or something else. So come connect with me on Instagram. And then if you're wanting to just dive more into these concepts surrounding manifestation, healing, all of the things that we've talked about, I also have a podcast called That's So Rich. And inside of That's So Rich, there's hundreds of episodes for you to be able to dive in and get a deep dive on a lot of the things that we've been talking about.
Yeah. And I just want to note for our listeners also that when you're trying to heal, when you're trying to move forward, when you're trying to manifest anything, whether it be your business, your career, general abundance, happiness, or relationship, it can be so important to have that support, whether it be through a group like your society or one-on-one, because often as we go along, we will uncover new blocks, right? And getting that support to move through and overcome those new blocks can be really helpful. Oftentimes there's stuff hidden there that we don't even know we're going to have to work through.
Totally. 100%. That's like when people ask me how I've manifested the life that I have today, I'm like, not alone. Like I haven't done a single step of this journey alone. And I like to be so transparent about that, because I think especially as women, we're given this like, you must figure it out on your own sort of energy. And that's the biggest lie ever. Because just like you said, we have our blind spots, we have our things, we have things that are just hard to understand and process on our own. And when you have somebody who's either walked the path or is walking a similar path, they're by your side to help you understand and uncover what those things are. You essentially take your timeline from whatever it could be and you condense it down into a shorter timeline where you're experiencing more of that abundance in a shorter period of time, as opposed to trying to figure it out all on your own.
Right. So any last thoughts, Kat, before we close out today?
Oh, man.
Any words of wisdom for 2025?
Yeah, whoa. 2025 is on the way. I would say for anybody who's listening to this, more so than anything, what I'm all about is helping people understand that like you are your own guru, you are your own teacher, you are your own healer in a world where we have every single bit of information available to us at all times at the tips of our fingers. I think it can be easy to forget how much wisdom already lives within you. And this is just your invitation to disconnect from the noise of the world for a moment and reconnect to the internal wisdom that you have inside of yourself, because every single thing that you're looking for answers on already exists within you. And 2025 will be a badass year if you really believe and connect in that internal wisdom that you have.
I love that. Great way to close out and a great way to dive into the new year. Thank you, Kat.
Absolutely. Thank you.